Hello everybody, my name is Neil and I'm the founder of my website, which is IELTSWheel.com. Today we'll be analyzing writing task 1 taken from Cambridge book 14. Now let's read and analyze this task in detail. The charts below show the average percentages in typical meals of 3 types of nutrients, all of which may be unhealthy if eaten too much. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, now we need to look at these 3 pie charts, and our job is to be able to compare and contrast data. Okay, so here we have average percentages of sodium, saturated fats, and added sugars in typical meals consumed in the USA. Okay, and here we have sodium, we have saturated fat, and we have added sugar. And we have several kinds of meals here. We have breakfast, we have dinner, we have lunch, we have snacks, and we have different percentages. Our job is to focus only on the main features, okay? The main features, and then make comparisons where relevant. So I will teach you how to focus on the main features and how to make comparisons only when it is relevant. Okay? So first of all, it's very important to write our introduction paragraph, and we need to paraphrase the task given. So how can we do it? Let me show you. The pie charts compare and contrast the proportions of sodium, saturated fat, and added sugar, all of which may disrupt health if used excessively for breakfast, snacks, lunch, and dinner in the USA. Okay, so first of all, if you just look at this carefully, here we have the charts, right? I have paraphrased and I have written the pie charts, so we need to be more specific. Okay, next, here we have show, and I have paraphrased this word by writing compare and contrast. When you compare, you are focusing on something similar. When you're contrasting something, you are focusing on something different. Next, we have percentages, the average percentages. And I have paraphrased this 2 words by writing the proportions of. So remember, when you're talking about the percentages, you can paraphrase this word and you can write the word proportion. So the proportions of sodium, saturated fat, and added sugar. Okay, next, so here we have all of which may be unhealthy if eaten too much. Now if you look at this carefully, all of which may disrupt health. So disrupt health means undermine health. Okay, if used excessively. In this case, excessively means too much for breakfast, snacks, lunch, and dinner in the USA. Okay, so that's what you need to do. You need to paraphrase the task given. Okay, next, in the next paragraph, it's very important to focus on general trends. Okay, we should not include any percentages. We should not include any precise figures or numbers. Our job is to focus only on the main trends given. Now, let's look at this carefully. I've written overall, while dinner and snacks appear to be the most detrimental to health, breakfast seems to be the least unhealthy. Okay, so first of all, you want to write the word overall, which means you want to look at this picture generally. Okay, so overall, and then now I'm using a complex sentence using the word while. Okay, while, and then I'm talking about something negative because the most detrimental to health. So this is minus. And then breakfast seems to be the least unhealthy. Okay, plus. So you see that I'm showing a contrast here, and therefore I'm using the word while. Okay, and the examiner really wants to see complex sentences in your graph descriptions. Okay, now let's just be more specific here. Overall, while dinner, okay, and snacks appear to be the most detrimental to health. Okay, in this case, appear to and seem to have the same meaning. So you don't want to write while dinner and snacks are the most detrimental. You want to write appear to be or seem to be. That's what you see, okay? And here you're trying to be more polite. Therefore, you're writing the word appear to or seem to. Okay, now if you look at this carefully, okay, we have while dinner and snacks appear to be the most detrimental to health, because we have higher percentages here, 43%, 37%, and 23%. So we're focusing on the largest percentages here, okay? Okay, and here we're talking about dinner, if you look at this carefully, and because dinner represents all of these percentages, okay, and snacks, here we have 42%, 21%, 14%, and all of these percentages are very high, okay, and therefore just write the most detrimental. So here I'm using a superlative form of an adjective. Okay, so detrimental, more detrimental, and the most detrimental. And remember, the most detrimental to health. You don't want to write for health, only to health. Next, breakfast seems to be the least unhealthy. Now, if you look at breakfast, we have only 14%, 16%, 16%. Okay, so these percentages are low, and therefore I've just written breakfast seems to be the least unhealthy. So here I'm using the word appear to, and here I'm using seems to. You see that? I'm using the parallel structure, and that's exactly what the examiner also wants to see. Okay, and here unhealthy, less unhealthy, and the least unhealthy. Good, so I'm using complex vocabulary and grammar here. Now let's just focus on the next paragraph. In the next paragraph, we have to be very specific. We have to focus on the percentages given, and we have to compare and contrast. Now let's read the first sentence. More specifically, when having dinner, one consumes over 1/3 of sodium and saturated fat at 43% and 37% respectively. Okay, so when you want to provide more specific details in your paragraph, you can reuse the phrase more specifically, followed by a comma. Okay, so make sure to have a comma here. When having dinner, okay, so we are talking about dinner here. One consumes over 1/3 of sodium, okay, and saturated fat, okay, here we have 43%, and here we have 37%. So, okay, 1/3 means more, 1/3 means 33% basically, okay, but over, that means more than 33%, and it's obvious here that we have more than 33%, 37%, and 43%. Okay, and here I want to explain something. After when, make sure to use ing. So when having dinner, when having lunch, Okay, one means a person or an individual. So if you want to sound very academic, you want to use the word one. So one consumes over 1/3 of sodium, yeah, in here 43%, and saturated fat at. So here you want to put a comma at, and then you want to give very specific percentages at 43% and 37%, and then the word respectively. Respectively means that 43% belongs to sodium and 37% represents saturated fat, and therefore you need to use the word respectively. And here in the sentence, I'm focusing on large percentages here. Okay, let's move on. A similar unhealthy trend can be seen among those who add a great deal of sugar when having snacks at 42%. And here again, I'm focusing on a very large percentage here. So a similar unhealthy trend. Okay, so healthy, unhealthy, which means not healthy trend, can be seen. I'm using the passive voice here. Okay, can be seen. Okay, use past participle. See, saw, seen. Okay, among those. You don't want to write among those people, just among those who. Okay, make sure to use who, not which, because we're talking about people. Therefore, we need to use who, and we use which for things only. Who add a great deal of sugar. A great deal of means much or a lot of, but the phrase a great deal of sounds really academic and sounds perfect for the examiner. So a great deal of sugar when having snacks. Okay, when having snacks, just look at this carefully. And then again, like a comma at 42%. Again, when plus ing, try to use this strategy. Okay, let's move on. This figure is almost twice as high as the proportion of those consuming sugar at lunch, at 19%. Okay, so this figure, we know what kind of figure we're talking about, this percentage. And remember, when you're talking about percentages, you don't want to write this number. Only this figure or only this proportion. Okay, don't write number. Don't write the word number. So you just use this. This figure is almost twice as high as the proportion of those consuming sugar at lunch here. Lunch at 19%. So now I'm comparing them. So what is the difference between 42% and 19%? Okay, so the 19 plus 90 is almost 42%, and that's exactly what I've written here. So so here this figure is almost twice as high as, which means 19 plus 19 as the proportion of. So instead of writing the word percentage, you can write this figure or the proportion. Consuming sugar at lunch. Okay, and then you need to present this percentage. Good, let's move on. The amount of sodium consumed for breakfast and snacks is the same, at 14%, which is almost half as much as the amount used at lunch, at 29%. So here, the amount of sodium, okay, so here I'm looking at sodium, consumed for breakfast and snacks is the same at 14%. So here I see the same figures, therefore I need to pay close attention to this. So the amount of sodium consumed for breakfast and snacks is the same, and then I need to present the percentage at 14%, and then which is almost half as much as the amount used at lunch at 29%. So again, what's the difference between 14 and 29%? Okay, so almost half as much, because 14 plus 14 is 28, which is less than 29%. Okay, and the 4, I just wrote the word almost, and then as much as the amount used at lunch at 29%. Here, I'm using the word the amount of because I'm talking about an uncountable noun, right? Sodium, you can't count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Therefore, the amount of, you can't write the word the number of, only the amount of. In here, I'm giving some extra information. This information is not important, and therefore it's important to use a comma here because it's a non-defining relative clause. Let's move on. The combined figures for saturated fat used for breakfast and snacks, 37%, is lower than the percentage of added sugar for snacks, 42%, which makes the latter an increased health risk. Okay, so here, the combined figures for. So here, we know what kind of figures we're talking about, therefore it's important to use the definite article the. Okay, and remember, the combined figures, you don't want to write the connected figures, the united figures. No, the combined figures, and then for. Okay, not of, but for. The combined figures for saturated fat. Let's look at this saturated fat used for breakfast and snacks. Breakfast, okay, and snacks, 37%. So the idea is you have to add up both of these numbers. 21% plus 16% is 37%. Is lower than the percentage of added sugar for snacks, 42%. So if you just look at this carefully, so 37% is lower than the percentage given here, and then at 42%. And now I'm going to give some extra information, okay, my extra comment, and therefore again I need to put a comma here, which makes the letter means the second one, the second item which we're describing now, and the second item is sugar. Okay, so added sugar. So I'm using referencing here. That's exactly what the examiner wants you to do. An increased health risk. So the idea is people use a lot of sugar and it's unhealthy. An increased health risk. And I have to mention all of these facts all the time. Why? Because here, if you look at this carefully, all of which may be unhealthy if eaten too much. And therefore, throughout my whole description here, I constantly try to remember this fact. Okay, so just look at this carefully. The most detrimental health, and then the least unhealthy. Okay, let's move on. A similar unhealthy trend. Again, I'm using this phrase. Okay, let's move on. And here again, which makes the letter an increased health risk. So I hope you have learned how to compare and contrast complex data. I hope you've learned how to look at several graphs at the same time, and you've learned how to focus on the main features, and you've learned how to make comparisons only when it is relevant. Okay. If you need my support for your IELTS preparation, please visit my website, which is IELTSWheel.com. Thank you very much for watching and analyzing this video lesson.